executive order restricting U.S. investments in high-tech sectors in that country. Now it's considering countermeasures. China's Ministry of Commerce is meeting with businesses to assess the order's impact. In Washington, though, there are those who say it didn't go far enough. Joining us, Congressman Mike Gallagher, chairman of the China Select Committee. So it doesn't even happen really till next year, Congressman. China's already grousing. You urged the president to take these measures. Why didn't it go far enough? What did it do, and what would you have liked for the EO to have done?
Sure. Well, first, credit where credit is due. The executive order does take an important step in the right direction. But if we want to stop fueling our own destruction, I don't think that it can be the last step. Right now, Americans, usually unwittingly, are funding the People's Liberation Army, paying for things like aircraft carriers, stealth fighter jets, artillery shells, and facilitating a mass surveillance and oppression of the Chinese people. And I don't think that any honest analysis of the executive order suggests it would stop that. It gives the Treasury Department the lead. It gives Treasury more off-ramps than the New Jersey Turnpike. And if you listen to what Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said, I'm confident she'll take every single one of those off-ramps. And worst of all, the bulk of the national security threat and the vast majority of American investment into China remain untouched by the executive order. We need to restrict public market investments into Chinese firms collaborating with the PLA or complicit in the CCP's human rights abuses, whereas this tackles a narrow subset of private investments. I think the bottom line from my perspective is that the CCP is an adversary, and you don't defeat an adversary or deter an adversary by shoveling billions of dollars into their military and technology program. And we have to ask ourselves if we want the pension fund, the overall retirement health of millions of Americans to be dependent on the success of investing in things like aircraft carriers, artillery shells, and fighter jets. So I hope we tackle this from a congressional perspective. I hope we legislate an enduring solution that endures across different administrations. And also, by the way, provide certainty to the financial business community who may not want to go in as aggressive a direction as I want to go, but need a glide path, need that certainty, and don't want to ping pong back and forth between different presidencies and different executive orders.
So you have, you're going down the list. So you don't think endowments at universities should, you don't think tax-exempt entities should be financing the CCP. You singled out BlackRock, or Congress did, BlackRock and MSCI. Why those two? Boy, there's a target on BlackRock. They can't do anything right.
Well, I mean, there's obviously BlackRock's one of the biggest players in the game. And we're really trying to understand how these companies, how these entities, particularly on the passive side of things, when you're dealing with ETFs and indexes, how they think about this, why they would have certain blacklisted companies in their index, in order to gather information that would inform sensible legislation. So we're still in the beginning stages of this investigation. We'll have to see where it takes us. And we want to get answers from MSCI and BlackRock. We know that BlackRock in particular has advocated for greater U.S. investments into Chinese companies. We've also heard from hearing witnesses under oath that it offered funds that included PLA contractors and other concerning companies. From our perspective, we don't think BlackRock or MSCI should funnel American dollars into certain companies like this. And we need to close the loopholes and at a minimum ensure Americans are not knowingly or unknowingly funding the Chinese Communist Party. So again, that's what this investigation is about. That's what our analysis of the executive order is about. It's about figuring out what is the best legislative approach to putting guardrails on outbound capital flows so we aren't knowingly funding our own destruction or abetting egregious human rights abuses. That's the principle. I'll concede it's very difficult to put into practice, but that's why we're doing a very deliberate investigation with an eye towards informing legislation.
It seems like it's difficult to put into practice because it's be difficult to define what these companies are. I mean, if you take a look at a company like an Alibaba or Tencent, which many U.S. investors probably own, you know, hedge funds, mutual funds, et cetera, the CCP has so-called special management shares in both of these companies. Does that mean that these companies are enriching the Chinese Communist Party? And if so, I mean, would you go as far as saying that people should not invest at all, U.S. investors, in companies like an Alibaba or a Tencent?
Well, what I'm in favor of is a sectoral approach. As I look at this executive order, I don't think it's truly sectoral. It proposes to take a sectoral approach by identifying 3 covered technologies, but it appears likely that Treasury will narrowly scope the regulations to certain companies that operate in subcategories. It also has this provision about with a reference to certain end uses by some of these technologies. And so anything with a civilian end use, as most of these sectors have, semiconductors, AI quantities could potentially
I guess I was referring, Congressman, to your investigation into BlackRock and MSCI, into funneling American dollars into companies, I mean, that fund the CCP. How do you define those kinds of companies? I mean, as part of this investigation, are you trying to define those companies? Because it seems like a lot of companies fall under that category, and that could affect a lot of American investment, not just through BlackRock and MSCI.
Yeah, via the investigation, we're trying to more clearly define what is the line. Now, admittedly, that's something that reasonable people can disagree upon, but I always have a few simple principles in mind as we consider this question. First, don't fund Chinese companies working for the People's Liberation Army. I think that's most obvious, right? We don't want to be allowing U.S. capital to fund military equipment, some of the things I referenced before. And our cursory investigation has revealed that that's happening right now. Things designed to kill Americans in a future conflict should clearly be above the line, not below the line. Also, companies that are implicated in forced labor and genocide or in building the CCP's techno-totalitarian surveillance state. I think Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill can agree on that. Second, as a principle, consider all capital outflows to China, public and private. And this is where the executive order really falls short, is it focuses on active investments like venture capital, private equity, but it exempts public markets like ETFs, mutual funds, individual stocks. So the private market investments represent about 15% of total U.S. capital investment into China. We need to address the remaining 85%. And again, to go back to what I said before, think about sectors, not individual companies. That's the weakness in our current approach. We have all these different lists with a bunch of different companies on them. The lists have loopholes in them. We can't play whack-a-mole sanctioning individual companies that will inevitably change names and create subsidiaries to avoid restrictions. So rather than creating an onerous case-by-case review mechanism, we should give investors unambiguous guidance over where they can and can't invest with a clear but short glide path to adjust. The problem, in my opinion, is urgent, and we can't take a year or 2 years to try and figure this out.
Okay. Congressman, thank you. If you, let's see, Bart Starr, if you had to rank Starr, Favre, or Aaron Rodgers, what would your ranking be? And how would you list those 3?
Well, every Sunday the Packers are playing, I'm always wearing the Starr jersey, so I have a special place in my heart for Bart Starr. I grew up in the Favre era, though, so Favre was my guy forever. But we've been lucky in Green Bay to have amazing quarterbacks. So this is the year of Jordan Love. We'll see if Jordan Love can continue the tradition, but I'm always optimistic about the Packers' chances to win the Super Bowl.
What about the Jets?
The Jets, I'm enjoying Hard Knocks, and I will always love Aaron Rodgers, but the Jets strike me as a cursed franchise. And again, we're talking AFC, NFC here, so I don't have hatred in my heart for the Jets, but I'm all about the NFC North here. I just want to win the division, then we'll see what happens.
Well, I want you to come back. We got to talk about this upcoming election. People mention you down the road. They do. You know, after a while, but what's going to happen?
I'm too boring. I'm too boring.
Really?
Okay.
But there's 15 candidates. You know what that means? That means a guy with 20% is going to win. And the Journal's got a piece today that makes no sense. We got to go. We have another
Thank you.
We have Brendan Boyle coming on later, one of your colleagues. So you might want to stay tuned. Coming up.
Good
Thanks.
Irishman.